Hey everybody, I'm Jeff Bower.
I'm Joey Marino. Welcome to Actor Chats.
This week is our third and final segment with Dan Frischman.
You probably know Dan from Head of the Class, where he played the nerd Arvid.
This episode, Dan talks about voice acting, meeting his hero Steve Martin, as well as advice for young actors out there.
So here is Actor Chats with Dan Frischman. I'm surprised you never got into
yes, you know,
voice the cartoons and things like that.
That's one of those things I started doing. I did one cartoon. And it was actually kind of exciting. I was in a room with Jonathan Winters, Ed Asner. Yeah, I couldn't remember his name. Yes, and Maurice LaMarche, who was one of the big, voiceover guys. And it was fun. And everyone was just in awe of Jonathan Winters, and he started to tell a story. And everyone just stopped. In the engineering room, everyone just stopped and listened to Jonathan Winters tell his story for 10, 15 minutes. And I think Maurice later told me that's part of the deal. When you're working with Jonathan Winters and he starts to tell his story, everyone's to shut up and listen to the story.
Nice.
Exactly. If you ever want to work in this town again.
Exactly. Listen to Jonathan Winters tell his story. But that was exciting. But I should do more of that. That is kind of
No, that's in your wheelhouse, I think. I'm going to be managing you, by the way.
Okay, thank you. I'm ready.
Yeah.
I am ready.
So where do you see it going for you? The business has changed, and how are you affected by the changes in the business? Because there's so much, like, I understand, I'm from New Orleans, and many people are telling me, Atlanta is huge. The joke is pretty much, if there's a script, you'll read the script and it says, fade up onto a city that has a tax break. Pretty much is the deal, because how do you find it different?
Well, there's a lot more of the reality television.
No,
I mean, it's amazing that some of these reality television stars are making a lot more than I had ever thought I could possibly make. Certainly more when I was making 3 and 4 times as much as I was making on Head of the Class and such. Not that it's that it's about the money per se, just about how popular those shows are, and those people can become.
And they don't have to learn lines.
Yeah, they don't have to learn lines. That's true. But that's brought some competition. But also, on the other hand, cable has brought a lot more opportunity for actors too. So has it changed all that much? I don't know that it has changed all that much, or that it's more difficult or more cutthroat. One thing I do know is that the studios have really tightened their belts a lot. So there's this whole thing called stunt casting, which didn't happen when I was, coming up in the 80s, meaning a lot of guys who are movie stars are taking guest star spots that usually went to unknowns. So that does make it more difficult.
And I think even the voiceover business too. Back in the day, you would never hear a movie star, Jeff Bridges.
Most voiceovers now, it's Sam Elliott or
and you can recognize, or James Spader, or one of those guys, and they would never have done that before.
Yeah, right.
Stanley Tucci, I stood in for Stanley Tucci on a show, and he told me, his AT&T gig, I think it was. He says, "That's my real gig." That's it. And then I do that as on the side. And what she meant was the money that it does, in fact, give you.
Interesting. I always find it interesting to just kind of talk to actors and see like what they do from getting the script to actually shooting it.
I know it's so mystical, because sometimes I'll tell you, you get a script and you go, "How am I gonna approach this?"
Yeah. Well, it's different for each part, really. But I mean, there is just the basic idea of doing your homework and finding out who that person is and how they are, personalizing it for yourself as much as you can. What about this person is me? What is something I envy about this person? What is something I don't like about this person? And just really either writing it down if you need to, kind of coming up with a whole like a catalog of traits this person might have that are like you, or not like you, and then just using that and moving forward with it. I mean, it's all about the experimentation. When I was coming up in Darryl Hickman's acting class, the first time you brought up the scene, you were just working on the place. I mean, you would memorize the scene, and then you would just work on the environment itself.
How?
Just really using the area. And then being comfortable being your character in the area, and that's even before honing down the event. Coming up with the event. Obviously then what does the character? After you have an idea of the character, then it becomes about what they want, because every character wants something, even if it's to sit and not be bothered. That is a very,
Yeah.
that is a very specific. That can be a specific event. I want to sit and not be bothered.
And behavior comes out of that.
Right, exactly. Behavior comes out of that, and then of course something has to happen where that character is going to be bothered. So it's first the character and then the event.
When do you? What part of it do you say, I'm going to learn the lines? And
That I believe has to come right off the bat.
right.
That because
And how do you do that? This is sometimes I've talked to actors before, and for some actors, I hate the ones that say, "Oh, I have a photographic memory." I hate those guys.
I always just start with the idea of the line, and then it really is just
Like for example, I know this is rudimentary, but critical. Like the idea of it, meaning the meaning.
Yeah, the meaning of it and picking out some words from it and what's that line mean. But it really does come down to just meat and potatoes, like studying like for a test.
Mm-hmm.
There's no secret to it. It's just I repeat it. I
quite a bit.
take a paper and put it over the line. So it really.
Does your mind ever feel constricted if you're really trying to get something? Like say if you're working on a television series, the next day I have to know this big chunk. I mean, how does that get? Do you sometimes get fried with it? Or?
No, there's no secret to it. It's you just got it. If you're going to be up there doing the part, you're not going to have any fun if you don't know the part.
Right.
There were actually times on head of the class where they'd give me a paragraph of math jargon.
Are you good at math?
No, and so I would write it on the back of Robin Gibbons' chair.
Oh,
Nice.
And I would
Little
pretend.
cheat sheet.
Yeah, exactly. I'd pretend to be looking at my pencil or whatever, and I would just read it off the chair because I wasn't going to come up with.
Were you pretty good at that? Reading it off the chair? Though?
I think
'Cause
so.
some people-
Yeah, just on occasion. I just once
right,
or twice.
just some of the bigger words.
Yeah. Howard Hessman would write his monologues everywhere in the classroom.
He worked on
Nice.
ER when I worked on ER.
Oh, really?
Howard Hessman did.
Okay,
he was
nice.
amazing though. He's very. I did find that he was trying to have to find things too, like you're saying.
Yeah.
But he's got this extemporaneous style that like he's creating it in the moment.
Yeah.
Kind of a feel to
Right.
him.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Mhm.
he's cool.
Yeah. I liked Howard. He was fun to work with. He didn't like the show,
Oh no.
but he was fun to work with when you.
Because I think he seemed like a serious actor.
Yeah.
quote unquote.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Any other things you would do, like, because you're very physical? Would things just come to you in the physical? part
Not
of it?
not really. I mean, I remember that, and that was also just an acting class thing from like Darryl Hickman's acting class when I was starting out. We were given a monologue from like the prologue to Henry V, and so we had to memorize it. And he wouldn't let us work on it until we really had it down, to where you didn't have to think about it. And I still remember some of it. Oh, from Muse of Fire, there was send the bride of heaven, invention, kingdom for a stage, princess act, Mars, behold the swelling scene, then showed the warlike Harry like himself, assumed the part of Meals, Mars. Anyway, that's power. Right. But I knew it that well.
It's
But
ingrained
that's
in you
interesting
still,
that
yeah.
you should do it in that fashion, because that's what I'm beginning to realize. Until you know it, like blah 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 blah, you don't know it. Is
exactly.
that what you say that?
Right. Absolutely.
Because when you have those moments when you're in a scene and you're overlapping someone, you're listening and you're throwing it back and blah 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 blah, and maybe you might have some words like what? I don't know. Those quick words, those are very difficult,
Yeah.
and you just have to know it.
You have to know it, because if you don't know it that well, then it's much more difficult to be in the moment with what's really happening and really listening to the other actor.
How important is listening?
Oh, that's 90% of it is listening.
What'd you say?
That's
comedy.
I see what you did there.
You can't teach that. You can, but it costs a lot.
Yeah, there you go. But it's to be spontaneous. You really and be in the moment. You can't be thinking about what your next line is.
How about the transition to directing and writing? Do you use a lot of the things you learned as an actor when you transition to those?
Oh yeah, I kind of know what. Having been around TV studios for many years, I kind of know what the actors need and what they don't need. Every actor, it doesn't matter if they're the star or everyone wants some praise.
Mm-hmm.
It's always good to hear, "Hey, good job." I just nice work, good. When you finish a scene, as directing Sam and Cat, once you come in and do the blocking, for instance. Most of the time, those actors already know how to make, how to bring the funny. But you can, but I know how to tweak it.
What was all your years the most often bit of direction you'd hear that's pretty universal? It might.
Yeah.
What would that be? Do you know?
A little less.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's it. Give me a little less.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because as actors, we want to please, we want to entertain. And so, I mean, and maybe I might be speaking for myself, but I think that's kind of a universal one.
Mm-hmm.
A little less.
Yeah.
When I was studying with not Daryl, but Jeffrey Tambor, I put up a scene from that play in acting class, from the play I wrote called About Faith.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a scene where I go to church for the first time with my girlfriend, and and I feel very daunting. It feels very daunting to me, and I knew how to be funny in being this kind of a fish out of water in the Catholic Church, and I was getting huge laughs, just having fun with it, and just doing bits and shtick. Jeffrey stops the scene, and he says, "I know this is unpopular. Everyone seems to be enjoying it, and you're getting big laughs. Great." He said, "The only thing I'm missing is the experience of a guy going to church for the first time." And he says, "So I want you to do it again, and this time no laughs. I don't want to. If you go for a laugh, we're just going to stop." And indeed, I couldn't help it. I still had to do a little funny thing with the holy water. Just look at it for a little too long. Just some little funny shtick,
Sure.
It's still getting laughs. Dan just kind of looked over at the holy water, and it is funny. But
right. Just a little too much, And he goes, no, start again, until I finally went, okay, just. I gave myself over to the dark side of no laughter, and I went and the laughs. I got laughs, but he didn't stop because they were coming out. It was coming out of what I was really there this time.
Right, genuine place.
I was really genuinely experiencing the Catholic Church in the communion. My girlfriend going to get the communion for the first time, and that whole thing. And afterwards, he kind of opened it up to the class, and they said, it was, the first time was a lot of fun because it was but it was kind of like, let's see what the comedian Dan will do with this. Whereas the second time it was, here's a guy going to church with his girlfriend, and it was just, it was funnier because we could be part of it. They said, because we could relate to it and be part of it rather than just kind of watching.
That's big.
A sketch. So that was a big lesson right there, and that was do less.
If you when you get something today, keeping that in mind, how do you think your acting has changed from, maybe
back
out of
in
the
the day,
class
yeah.
and to now, right now?
Right.
Well, how do you think it would be? I mean, in terms of a real meaty part where you could kind of live in it. And,
well, I would just do it. I would just have a different part. I would find it very difficult to go back and do something like head of the class. And it's not that I'm pompous like I've grown out of it. Right. It's just that I'm in a different place where I don't think I would be as good. That's what I really think. I don't think because I look at some of those on YouTube, some of the old head of the class episodes, and I think I did need to be a little larger than life.
Yeah.
I think if I was more realistic with some of those scenes, it wouldn't have been as good.
I think so. I think you're right. It's so funny. I don't know why I'm thinking this, but I remember, seeing Michael Jordan was watching himself early on in his career when he hit this shot over Craig Elo, and he's pumping his fist and jumping in the air. Yeah. And he shook his head and he goes, "God, I had a lot of energy back then." You know what I mean? So I think it's like, when we're that youthful, we have so much energy that it comes naturally from where we are.
Exactly.
And who we are.
Yeah. And
so you can't be, and if you were trying to amp up false energy, I think that's an interesting thing about comedy, is that when people that are, like the icons, as they got older, I think, unless you change a little bit, it's like a famous comedian maybe swinging from a chandelier. You're thinking, God, I hope she doesn't break a hip. You know what I mean? It's not the funny in the same way. So I think you have to kind of find it from where you are now.
Right. It's kind of like when Lucille Ball went and did the last sitcom.
Right.
It was in the 80s. Yeah. But she was playing a grandmother, but doing the same sort of shtick that she had. Right. That she excelled so wonderfully at, but now it wasn't as good, and instead of it's too bad.
That's not that she's bad. It's just you can't do the old thing.
It actually seemed uncomfortable, Where if she had done something like a Golden Girls,
Oh,
you know,
that's a great example because those women found something that was uniquely theirs
Yes,
that they
right.
could do that.
yeah,
And still Betty White.
Oh,
you know,
boy, she can do it all
My
right.
goodness
Yeah.
gracious, what timing and all that thing. You know, I used to have this feeling when you first started with Stanislavski and the method, where it has a religious fervor to it. I don't know if
Yeah.
you felt that, but then you realize this all type of acting. Like there's the timing stuff, that comedy. Did your comedy come from instinct, or did it come from rhythms, or you were just instinctively doing rhythms?
Oh, well, like the stand-up comedy just came from sitting over a piece of paper and thinking of something that might be funny. You know,
Right.
You know, there was no. I don't really think it came from instinct, but comedy acting did. You know, that was instinctual,
Yes.
definitely.
So you knew waiting a certain amount of time,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then
Yeah.
hitting the punchline,
Right, and that again, that just comes from all those. Again, having done the magic shows for all those years, I knew, you know,
working the kids silly.
yes, right, working the kids circuit and working the kids silly.
Yeah,
and then doing the comedy improv. That was my, you know, the kind of the training ground, knowing where the laughs were and what kind of thing would be funny. I mean, I think that one of the most astute things ever said about comedy was by Stan Laurel, when he was asked, how do you be funny? And he said, see what the audience likes and then head in that direction. I mean, and that's
very pragmatic.
Yeah, that's the beginning and the end of it. I mean,
Yeah,
there's not
exactly.
like, you know, there's no formula necessarily.
Who were your heroes growing up? Did you have specific heroes?
Well, I remember Robin Williams, and you worked with Robin
Recently,
Williams
and,
for recently
Yeah, the
for
crazy ones. Yeah.
and Steve Martin is another of my idols.
He did magic too.
Oh yeah,
Did he not
he started
sell
out. He
magic?
started out selling magic tricks at Disneyland, a little magic shop at Disneyland, and that's where he used to go hang out at. There was like I forget the name of the show, Wild West, Wild Bill Hickok, something like that. Anyway, there was a vaudeville kind of show where the guy did balloons and everything, and that's how he started his.
Did you memorize any of the
Trajectory.
comedy albums of the day?
You know, my very first stand-up routine was Steve Martin's routine that I'd seen on the Carson show one night.
What was
I remember laughing my head off, and my mother actually came down and turned off the TV because I was laughing too hard. It was one he actually came out. I never saw him do it since then, but he came out with a plant that he put on a stool, and he said that he couldn't afford an actual sidekick, so the plant was his sidekick. And then he took out a list. I'd never seen him before, so I had no idea what to expect. And then he took out a list of jokes, and he said, I have so many jokes, I'm not going to fit them all, so I'll just read them off to you, and if you like them, you tell me, you know, this round of applause. So he said, record joke, bathroom bit. Okay, bathroom bit. And he'd say the bathroom bit joke, whatever it was, and then when people would laugh, he'd go, oh, shh, and look at the plant and go, you missed it. He said something, you know, he missed one, and it was so goofy, and he did, you know.
He just had that absurd
Yeah, he
style
had
that was
yeah.
different than
and I'd
anybody.
never seen it. And he was in a suit. Anyway, so I went up on a chorus talent show at high school, and I got up and did Steve Martin's routine, and I got big laughs. I did balloons. I made an animal balloon.
Oh, you know how to do that.
Yeah, because I'd done that from doing kids' parties. But I did Steve Martin's jokes with the animal balloon.
Exactly.
I started off saying, "How many of you have ever heard of Steve Martin?" Nobody had.
Good sign. Good
Yes,
start.
yes. And I said, good. I'm going to do his act for you. So I mean, I gave him absolute credit.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
good.
there you
You
go.
know, and then I did his act, and I thought, wow, that really went well. I guess, except I'm going to probably have to come up with my own material. A funny bit though was, cut to, I don't know, all those years later, I was doing, I was on the head of the class show, and my friend Dan Snyder knew I was a huge Steve Martin fan. But we were doing, there was a scene which featured me in the classroom, and I was kind of off book, but hadn't quite memorized it, so I was really just kind of stumbling through it. And I'd pick up the script, and then I put it down, and stumble through it, and stuff. But Dan says to me, after I was finished the scene, he goes, now, what would you think if, I mean, it was awful. I mean, it was just, it came out wrong. But Dan says, what would you think if Steve Martin saw you do that? And I said, well, I just kind of laughed. That wouldn't be good. And he just points. Steve Martin is standing at the edge of the stage. Oh, no. He's like on the set with the producer who he was friends with. And they just what he was there with his wife, his then wife Valerie. No, it was the actress. I forget his wife who was the actress. And I just went all mealy mouthed, like, oh my God, how you doing? Oh my God, I'm a big fan. And he was very quiet. You know, he just kind of said, oh, very nice to meet you. And I told him how my first stand-up routine was his routine. Afterwards, the producer who was, came up to me and he said, "Oh, Steve Martin just thought you were funny." And he said that Steve Martin told him that how ironic it was that he knew the producer because the producer had written for Steve Martin. The producer started off as a writer for Steve Martin's material. So Steve Martin told him, "Isn't that ironic? The stuff he did in high school is probably stuff you wrote."
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Coming around. In our closing, we usually like to ask what advice you have for anyone coming into the business or anyone interested in this business.
Oh yeah, well, in acting in particular.
Yeah, in particular acting.
I used to give talks at UCLA actually about this very topic. During the summer, they would have media workshops, it was called, and they'd bring in high school kids and then college kids who wanted to be actors, directors, and I was often the actor would come in and talk to them. And the first thing I would say is, if you think you might want to be an actor, don't do it. Do anything else. It's so difficult. I know hundreds of actors, and maybe 10 of them are making a living at it. If you have to do it, then you should do it. If it's like so in you that there's nothing else that you'd be happy doing, and you just know that you're going to make it, and you're not going to give it a year. You're going to give it at least 5, of really going at it. Then maybe you should do it. That's the best advice. Get into a good class, because the technique will mean a lot. Do comedy, improv, and scene work, and then just make sure every day you're doing something, taking steps toward wherever you need to be. That's it. That's my advice. The first advice is don't do it unless you have to.
That's great advice.
That's great.
Thanks a lot, Dan.
Sure.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Joey and Jeff.
Well, that's the end of our third and final segment with Dan Frischman.
That was informative and touching.
And entertaining.
Yes.
Be sure to tune in next week when we have a different actor to chat with.
This has been Actor Chats with Dan Frischman.